What's up guys, this is Minjun. In the last video, we already set up a Spring Boot project for our new web app. It's time to add MySQL database connection to it. It's okay if you did not watch the previous video about the new project setup. This configuration is completely independent and can be used in any new Spring Boot project.
MySQL database needs to be installed on our OS. There are too many resources online that talk about how to install MySQL on different OS, so I'm going to skip this. To verify MySQL is ready for us, let's open up a terminal, log in with root. Alright, since the MySQL database is verified, let's continue configuring our Spring Data JPA. Why do we want to use Spring Data? Because writing our own data access layer can be very cumbersome. There's too much boilerplate code. We developers want to focus on the business logic, so a nice library that writes the boilerplate code for us is great. To configure the database connection for Spring Data, we must need a database first. Let's create one. In order for our app to talk to the database, we need to create an account just for the app. Now we grant privileges on SD Camp database only to this user. In other words, this user is not able to connect or do anything with other databases on this machine. Alright, let's check if I can log in with this new user. Okay, log in, no problem. Let's continue with the next step. To be able to use Spring Data JPA library, we need to add the dependencies into Gradle. Let's go to Google and find the library name because I don't remember. We also need another dependency called MySQL connector for Java. This library is not only for Spring Data. For any Java application to talk to MySQL, we need this library. Notice that for MySQL connector, we're using runtime only. But for other libraries like Spring Boot, Starter, Data JPA, or Starter Web, we're using implementation. That's because MySQL connector is used during Java runtime. It means that when Java application is running and try to connect to the database, it needs this library. Other dependencies are declared as implementations because they are needed in compile time. Next step is to configure application.properties. We can configure Spring Boot in all kinds of different ways using application.property file. In this case, we're using it to configure MySQL connection. As you can see, the application.property file is just a key value storage for configuration properties. Now we have three variables in this file. Spring.datasource.url tells Spring Boot where to find a data source, or where to find, in this case, MySQL data source. And then we have username and password. This is the credential of the database user that we created earlier. Alright, next let's create a table in this database. There are multiple ways to do it. I'm just gonna use a script file and then run the script. This table is called member. The member is basically the member of the website. Verify the creation of the table. Now the table was created, it's time to create an entity Java class to map the table. Entity annotation tells Spring Boot this class is an entity class that's going to be mapped to a table. The table annotation specifies the table name in the database. Add 4 fields in this class to map the 4 columns in the database table. ID annotation is usually used on primary key. Generated value annotation specifies that a value will be automatically generated for that field. And then we have column annotation. It's just to tell Spring Boot this is a column, and we can have a column name that corresponds to the table column name. Periodically save our change is a good idea. At this point, our table is still empty. Let's add some sample data in our table. Again, there are multiple ways to do it. In this case, I'm just going to utilize IDE's built-in data source tool. You can use a script or a console. It doesn't really matter. Alright, let's check if the data is submitted into the database. Alright, looks good. We now have the configuration, the entity class, the table, the database. Now it's time to do the real magic. Create a package to contain the repository class that I'm about to add. Create a class, or in this case interface, called member repository. This class is going to extend the CRUD repository provided by Spring Data JPA. The CRUD repository takes 2 generic types. One is our member entity, the other one is the type of our ID. This is pretty much all we need to do to hook up the Spring Data JPA. We can now use this member repository interface to do basic CRUD operations without writing a single SQL query. For people who don't know what CRUD means, it means create, read, update, and delete. To see Spring Data and our MySQL connection in action, we can create a REST endpoint to return all the data in our member table. This getAll method will return a collection of members. Inject the member repository in this controller. Since member repository extends the CRUD repository that Spring Boot data provides, it has all the useful methods that CRUD repository has. FindAll method will give us all the record of members in the table. Let's run the application and see if it works. Alright, looks like we have a problem here. Let's see what happened. Looks like it's a time zone issue. It's a very common problem when we use JDBC. To solve this problem, we can go to application.properties and add a query string at the end of our data source URL. The time zone we specify here needs to match MySQL's time zone. Run the application again. It should work this time. Alright, it's running. Let's go to the browser and take a look. The application is running alright. Let's take a look at the members endpoints. Whoopsie, I forgot to create the request mapping in the controller. Alright, let's run again. Okay, cool. We can see all the member records are returned as JSON objects. Notice that we did not write any SQL query for this operation. That's the beauty and power of Spring Data.
Alright guys, that's it for this video. All the resources are listed in the description down below. Please make sure to check it out and play with it. And remember, software is like cathedrals. First we build it, then we pray.